Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe is up for a fourth term in office. Almost all of the exit polls predict a resounding victory for Abe. According to a poll by local broadcaster TBS, the incumbent Prime Minister's Conservative coalition is predicted to win 311 seats out of the 465 seats in the parliament. Another poll by the state broadcaster NHK also gives Team Abe 253 to 300 seats almost a month ago. Now, Shinzo Abe had dissolved the lower house of parliament, pushing the country into a snap election a year early than expected. The decision was triggered by a spike in ratings for Abe. Experts say the favourable numbers were triggered primarily by Abe's tough stance against North Korea and the ongoing nuclear crisis.
Kind of popularity that Abe has got in the last few months, that is because of his stand for against North Korea, and this is giving a strong signal that the kind of forces, the military forces that were being used here, now they are going to get a little better, and there is going to be a strong message being given by the Japanese people also, that now what kind of a stand they want to take.
これじゃもうね、破滅しちゃうと思う、国がね。だからね、今までこういう政治家がね、出たことないんですよ、日本は。その北朝鮮の圧力にやっぱり屈しないっていう、やっぱりその安倍さんの姿勢をやっぱり私も支持しておりますので、はい、まあこれからアメリカ、韓国と連携して、やっぱりそういう強い意志でやっぱり言ってもらいたいなというふうに思ってます。で、そういうところはやっぱり今回の選挙かなりやっぱり注目します。
And also to discuss more on this from Tokyo, we're joined by Professor James D.J. Brown. He's an international affairs expert. Good evening, Professor Brown. In fact, unlike Theresa May, who called a snap election in Britain earlier this year, which badly failed for her, do you think Shinzo Abe's bid, in fact, to secure a strong mandate for him in this snap election has really worked well for him?
Well, at the moment, we're working simply on the basis of an exit poll. But despite that, I think we can already say that, yes, Abe's gamble has definitely paid off. This was a significant risk. Earlier in the summer, it seemed like Prime Minister Abe was going through his last weeks or months as Prime Minister. Now it seems like he could be settling into the seat of Prime Minister for several more years.
Also, Professor Brown, what do you think are the reasons or perhaps the factors that have really worked for Shinzo Abe this time with in fact, calling a snap election too early? Perhaps, can you just list out some of the indicators or perhaps some of the factors which have worked in favour for him?
Well, one factor is the North Korean crisis. And in fact, that's something that the Prime Minister has been emphasising in his campaigning, that he has tried to convince voters that at a time of national crisis with the threat from North Korean missiles, it makes sense to have a safe pair of hands and that voters should trust in the Liberal Democratic Party that has dominated Japanese politics for so many decades, rather than risking their time, their government with an untrusted opposition. That's one factor. Another one is the problems in the opposition itself. In calling the election early, the Prime Minister deliberately sought to try and catch the opposition unprepared. And in fact, after calling the election, the opposition has really fragmented. We've had these two new parties created, neither of which really had time to kind of organise, and that seems to have worked also in the favour of the ruling LDP.
In fact, there was hope that he was supposed to win fewer seats where the predictions had come in earlier, but now exit polls clearly state that he's on the run to win and might, in fact, also be the longest, in fact, reigning leader post-war in Japan.
That's right, and assuming that these exit polls are correct, he's going to be in a very strong position. Now, it depends not just on the results of the general election, but also the dynamics within the ruling Liberal Democratic Party, because the Prime Minister has an intra-party election happening next year in the autumn. and he needs to be approved to be president of the Liberal Democratic Party for another 3 years. Now, when he was seemingly a lot weaker earlier on this year, there were a lot of doubts as to whether his own party would keep him on. Now, however, having won yet another election, it's almost guaranteed that he will be given that third term as president of the LDP, which means he's able to stay on as Japanese Prime Minister, potentially even until the autumn of 2021.
Also, Professor Brown, his popularity had in fact gone down in recent times. But do you think his sort of uncompromising stance on North Korea has given him that particular status back on how he in fact dealt with that particular crisis in the North? Do you think that has really worked for him during the snap elections, or there are other reasons here?
Well, it's sort of yes and no. Yes, the North Korean crisis has worked in his favor. He's been seen to be a strong leader in that regard. He's been very outspoken in his criticism of North Korea, and I think that that has helped him. But I think it would be wrong to say that Prime Minister Abe has become, again, a very popular Japanese leader. Yes, his party, it seems, has done exceptionally well, but that has a lot to do with the lack of alternatives. I don't think it's that the Japanese public has now come to really love Prime Minister Abe. There are still some concerns about him, this perception of kind of cronyism, perhaps a degree of arrogance in his rule. It's rather that they see him as a better option rather than the alternatives.
All right, Professor Brown, we'll leave it at that. Thank you for joining us on the program and discussing the Japan snap elections with us here.